Welcome to Your School Journey, where we dive into the topics that matter in education today. We're here to help parents understand the conversations happening in schools and offer tips to support your child's learning along the way.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today on Your School Journey, we're discussing how parents can set their children up for success as they move from Year 9 into the senior years of schooling. We're joined today by Peter Robertson, the Director of Studies at Emmanuel College. Welcome to the podcast, Pete.
Thank you, Mal. It's an honour to be here.
You've spent a number of years in the senior schooling space, so you've got a lot of experience there. I'll start by asking what you think it is about years 10, 11 and 12 that makes it such a unique and important part of a student's journey.
So I think year 10, 11, 12 is probably the first time students start thinking about what happens after school. And so a lot of the activities that happen in 11 and especially in year 12, they actually start having direct impact on what options are available to students after they finish year 12. So as compared to in the junior years where their kids might still be dreaming about what's coming after school, but their actions and their results in assessment and their choices aren't directly impacting those outcomes.
And what kind of things are you starting to see happen with students when they start engaging with this kind of material, start engaging with having to think through these things?
So we tend to get a lot of questions, mainly from parents actually, around tertiary entrance. So students start considering what are my options post-school. It could be tertiary entrance, it could be work, it could be taking a gap year. So students start thinking that way, parents start thinking that way. There isn't an emphasis that comes along with that around results and assessment, which unfortunately isn't fueled well by the media, who concentrates a lot on tertiary entrance scores in our context, and that starts to drive a lot of decisions and questions that I get from many parents around those tertiary entrance scores. But in reality, not everyone is going to go to university. We do have a proportion of students that will go straight into the workforce post year 12. We've got other students that will take a gap year and then look at university. We've even had students that have taken a gap couple of years before actually considering tertiary studies. So really we're trying to set students up on a trajectory for success rather than actually making sure they have success straight out of the gates, because that can put a lot of pressure on students and fuel anxiety and all of those sorts of things.
Do you find that students and parents need to take different approaches depending on where they feel their final outcome is going?
Yes, some parents and students do take different approaches. So there's always some students that they just know they're not going to go to university. It's not for them. And so they don't need to actually pick subjects and get results for that tertiary entrance score. And I think that's actually wise because they've sort of already ruled that out. That's not actually for them. Now, I've actually had some scenarios with some of those students actually turn around 5 years later and go, yeah, I do want to do tertiary studies now. And that's okay. There's multiple pathways into that, but they can actually start making those decisions early if they've decided, no, that's not for me. And that actually is going to give them a better journey through years 10, 11 and 12 because they aren't beating themselves over the head with subjects that are overwhelming. And we also see that with students that are following that tertiary entrance trajectory and trying to play the game. Where we are, we've got the ATAR, but I know there's other tertiary entrance scores in different jurisdictions where they're trying to play the scaling game and picking subjects that maybe is too hard for them because they think that they're going to scale well and improve their tertiary entrance score. And honestly, that's a really poor way of picking and making decisions. Really, it's better if students are picking subjects that they really enjoy, because with enjoyment comes engagement. With engagement tends to come good results and they think they're going to do well at, rather than picking subjects that they think will actually lead to a tertiary entrance score that is really high and trying to play that game. And honestly, that'll make their journey through years 10, 11, 12 much smoother because they're doing things that they enjoy and they're interested in rather than doing subjects that they are enduring based on a single score. And at the end of the day, any tertiary entrance score is used for one thing, and that's tertiary entrance into universities. And once that event has happened, there's no meaning behind them, yet we put a lot of emphasis on them in the media and in our society.
Well, you've mentioned that there's multiple opportunities there for students as well after a couple of gap years or whatever they want to do, that, hey, maybe they can go back into university if they want to choose that. So there's always those options.
Yeah, there's always another pathway. It just might mean a bit of time. And there's also, I've had other students that have gone and done the tertiary entrance thing for a year and decided it's not for them, and actually taken a gap year after that and ended up going into a trade and had just as much success. And that, honestly, that's the goal that we're looking for, is student success.
Yeah. So after things have happened, they can kind of make decisions. Obviously, if we turn it around and say on the other end of things where I'm making these decisions, you've talked about those students that they know exactly what they want, they know where they're heading, and they make those choices. And of course, there might be students that don't know what they want, or those that are in the middle. What kind of advice would you give parents in trying to help them to start to maybe focus a bit more on where they're headed?
Yeah, so the first thing is trying to do a bit of self-discovery of what they're interested in. What are their passions? What do they enjoy doing? Are there subjects at school that they actually do enjoy doing and they could see themselves doing more of that kind of thing down the track? It's trying to follow that pathway of what they're interested in, because that will lead to that engagement and finding some success. And if they don't pick the right subjects for their eventual careers, that's okay. We sort of want them to have success moving through school, and there's always multiple pathways to get where students would like to get to. There's only a few pathways that are really limited. The high demand subjects like medicine, where you do need those high tertiary entrance scores to enter, those students tend to be really well driven and they know exactly what they want, and they're pursuing that high tertiary entrance score to meet that target. But most students, they can get by with the subjects that they do here at school and reasonably good results. And if they sort of miss the mark, there's usually another pathway into whatever degree or course or career that they're interested in.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention now. That's of course the future careers, future pathways. What kind of demeanours, habits, behaviours do you think would set up a student for success if they're in grade 9, they're heading into grade 10?
It's a really interesting one. Grade 9 is a very interesting year because I'm a maths teacher by trade, and it tends to be the year where students that are intelligent, bright students have been able to sort of ride along through years 7 and 8, using their intelligence to sort of get by. And year 9 tends to be when gears start changing and they actually need to put in some hard work because it's not as intuitive as it might have been in earlier years. So having some good study habits embedded through year 7 and 8 is really good. I kind of equate it to stretching when you exercise. When you're young and flexible, you kind of go, why do I bother stretching? I've never been injured. But when you hit 40, then you know you need to stretch because you're going to hurt yourself otherwise. Same sort of thing. If you've got good, well-developed study habits through year 7 and 8, yeah, you may not need them, but you've got that routine. Then when you hit 9, 10, 11, 12, when you need that routine, you've actually got that well practiced and well rehearsed.
And what kind of advice could you give to parents, say, to help support their child if maybe they haven't developed those habits yet?
So I'm a very big believer in natural consequences. So if students haven't developed those, then letting them wear some of those consequences of those decisions to not, okay, you've chosen not to study. Okay, what's the consequence of that? And then talking through, questioning, okay, what could have been a better outcome? How are we going to improve this? Opening up that dialogue around that. I also think that providing some organisational structures for students as well, like a calendar, so the students have got a little bit of accountability, so they can put all their assessment on the calendar and it's viewable to them, to the parents, to siblings that can maybe kind of go, hey, don't you have an assignment due in 2 weeks? Have you started work on that yet? And so you can have some accountability to sort of build those systems. I'd suggest a calendar like that. Paper on a wall is much better than electronic because electronic isn't always open and in front of you, whereas paper on a wall is always visible. And just providing some structure around that for to help them find their pathway for how they're going to tackle that study and that routine and that organisation that they need.
So this next question, at the risk of sounding like maybe bulldozing the way through for your child or anything like that, and we've heard about helicopter and bulldozer parents, are there any questions that parents can ask teachers to help support their children as they are navigating these challenges?
I think probably some of the things that parents can ask their teachers, probably when is assessment coming? So having an idea of some due dates around assessment is good. Honestly, as you're leading into sort of 10, 11, 12, a lot of that onus needs to sit on the student more than the parent. So students asking those questions is good. Students actually writing that in a diary and documenting that is probably where I'd want to push things rather than parents so much. But parents kind of maybe being that squeaky wheel at home saying, hey, have you got those due dates yet? Have you actually chased that up? Have you got that on the calendar yet? Where is it? I need to see it. Where are you up to with that assignment? That's probably really useful. But putting that onus back on the student, because I think that ultimately through 10, 11 and 12, it's the student that needs to own that journey more so than the parent. And I think that's probably the difference between 7, 8, 9 and 10, 11, 12 is 7, 8, 9, parents are pretty well involved in education and managing students and workloads and homework and those sorts of things. Through 10, 11, 12, that transition needs to switch across to the student actually taking responsibility for that and that gradual release of responsibility to the student. And so parents kind of need to start taking a backward step, but can still be that, force to sort of drive the students in the right direction.
That's really good. So you're basically giving them more responsibility, helping them to become more of an adult, really.
Absolutely.
Is this part of their journey to maturity?
Absolutely. The number of parents that I've had, actually I don't have that many, but there's a few that will jump in to save their students from difficulty at the drop of a hat. And it actually is disabling for those students because they're not actually learning those skills themselves. And so I'd say unless there's harm happening, best advice I'd have is probably to actually step back and let the student kind of flounder a little bit and find the reason why they need to make these good decisions. And they have to kind of wear some of that natural consequence. And that's actually the best learning experience that they can get rather than jumping in and saving them.
So do you think wearing that natural consequence is probably more important to do maybe when you're in year 11, not when you're in year 12, if you can at all avoid it? And I've got a scenario for you and I want to see if you can respond to it. It's the night before an assignment is due and you just find out about it. What can we do as parents to help our kids avoid this?
So look, you want that scenario to happen in year 11, not in year 12 when it starts to count. So if it's happening in year 12, then you have a few big questions to have for the students. If it was year 11, I'd be going, all right, how long have you had the assignment? When did you find out about it? Where are you up to on the assignment? And then start asking questions around like, okay, last weekend when you knew about this assignment, what were you doing? You spent all weekend playing a computer game. Imagine if you'd actually done this assignment, how less stressed you'd be now. And actually just highlight those consequences that they're going to feel, but maybe they can't see immediately and plan forward as to, okay, how are we going to tackle this next time to avoid this scenario again? And then you've got something to refer back to. So I'd like to think that we've sort of tackled that in year 11 and then year 12 students kind of have it. But if it's in year 12, at that point, I think that I would still probably not go and bend over backwards for that student because they have made that decision to delay an assignment and they kind of need to learn that consequence and it is their pathway that they need to own. I think I'd still let the student that's their consequence to own and how they're going to solve that, how they're going to get that finished. If it's an all-nighter and they're going to be tired the next day at school, that's the consequence that they wear. I would avoid things like giving them the day off school the next day to go and do the assignment because then they're just getting further behind in their other subjects as well. So it is an interesting one. It's one of those scenarios that you kind of want to hope you've nipped that in the bud in year 11 or year 10 and you've solved that problem rather than waiting to year 12.
So we've talked about year 11 and 12 and particularly year 12 being a high pressure type of year for some of these students. And I know that there's a lot of talk around anxiety and how people are dealing with that. And apart from some of the things that you mentioned already, are there some other ways that you could advise parents on how they help their children deal with that anxiety, the pressure that year 12 brings?
So I think parents have got the added bonus of a little bit more life lived than their children. And so providing some perspective is really good. And that perspective from living a little bit more life, the impact of this year 12 year, it's a little single drop in the ocean really in comparison to a lifetime of success. And just giving that perspective is really good. Balancing study, work, social, recreational activities is really important as well. So a balance between those. Anything a student's involved in, there's going to be a cost to that. And so I know at our school we've got students that are involved in everything. Their sport, their performing arts, their leadership captains, their highly academic students, and that that pressure of being involved in so many things actually creates a lot of that anxiety. There's a performance pressure as well. And probably one of the biggest things there is a focus on results and assessment grades. Now, at year 12, I know there is a big focus on that because it leads to tertiary entrance. But definitely through 7, 8, 9, 10, those grades, they're a lagging measure. And so if students are stressing and anxious over grades, I think they're focused actually in the wrong thing. The grade is the lagging measure. What leads to the grade? Well, good learning. So a focus away from the grade, and honestly, I'm a parent myself. I would resist the urge to reward grades because your focus is on the wrong thing. Reward learning, reward the activities that go into good deep learning. That would be my advice. Rewarding the grade is just going to fuel that anxiety if that's how you want to reward your child. But the focus on deep learning and the activities that go into learning, that extra time of study, completing that homework, they're really good activities. If they're done consistently throughout the term, then you find that when it gets to assignment time or assessment time, the anxiety actually doesn't need to be there because they've been working all term. That anxiety and that stress and that pressure tends to come when students have been putting things off and procrastinating for many students, or they've got this extra pressure around performing for high grades. And hopefully if students have picked subjects that they really enjoy and are good at, then they're naturally wanting to be curious and learn and do all those leading activities that lead to a good grade and as the outcome. But the focus really needs to be on that leading measure.
That's a really great focus, just to focus on learning. And I think that needs to be told far more often to far more people, particularly from our education perspective, because, it seems there's a common understanding that it's just all about the grades or all about, whether the content has been taught sometimes, but it's the actual, have I learnt the material and then I cruise through the exam, That's what I've been saying to my students.
That's right. If you've been working hard through the term and when the exam pops up, you should just go, yep, I know this, I've been working on this all term, and you just sit and do it, and there's actually no anxiety around it because you're confident. Whereas if you do nothing all term and then the exam suddenly gets thrown at you, there is this last minute panic, and any student that sort of tries to convince you that the last minute cram is what works for him, they're lying. They're actually creating more anxiety for themselves, I think.
Well, as we draw the conversation to a close, it's been very, very informative, Pete. What would you like to leave our parents with? What are some takeaways that we could give them right now that they can go straight away and say to their children, help their children with?
So probably starting with setting up some routines for being organised. So the calendar on the wall with the assessment tasks on it, the big events for the school so that's visible, and there's some accountability there is probably square one. Allowing students to wrestle with their learning and not jumping in to save them too quickly, because it's that wrestle, but sitting in that learning pit where they're sort of, I don't quite understand this. That wrestle is actually where your deepest learning is going to happen. So you can throw a few questions in there to try and help them out of the pit, but they do need to wrestle with that learning. And sometimes teachers put students in those positions where they have to wrestle with things and make it a little bit difficult, quite intentionally for that learning. So don't rescue students too quickly from being in that learning pit. And that learning pit can be to do with behaviour as well, making a less than wise decision, and let the student actually wrestle with the consequences of that. That's actually some of the deepest learning happens there. Don't jump in and save them from that. That actually is a bit disabling for the students, is probably good. Budget your time. So there's only so many hours in the day. And so I know at our school, we've got students that try and get involved in absolutely everything, and they don't actually budget the cost of that in their time and their effort. That being said, we've got students involved in everything, and because of the number of commitments, they have to be extra organised. So they're actually some of the best organised people I know. But just be conscious of the cost of being involved across 10, 11, 12. Enjoy the journey. 10, 11, 12 is actually some of the best years of your life. So don't forget to enjoy that and enjoy some of the social experiences there. It's not all about academics. Yes, they're important, but there's also social aspects there that students need to learn and pick up on. And probably the last thing is just that gradual release of responsibility. Allow your child to actually start to make some decisions and learn from that. I think they're really important things to set them up for success post-school.
Thanks so much for sharing all of that, Pete, and really appreciate some of the things that you said there, and I think this will be super insightful for our parents.
It's been a pleasure, Mal. Thank you.
Your School Journey is an initiative of Emmanuel College as part of our commitment to partner with parents in shaping the learning and growth of young people. This podcast is hosted by Mal Gaylor with audio production by John Eddy and executive produced by Dan Pearson. If you found this episode valuable, we'd love you to share it with other parents, subscribe for future episodes, and leave a review. You can also connect with us for more insights into education and to explore how Emmanuel College can support your child's learning journey.